Good. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. And I'm sorry I'm late with this one. Thank you for all of your support. When it comes to Ava, my dog, I would say hi, I would show her, but she's still recovering. So this week I have been emailed very recently by one of you lovely subscribers to look at the palms of the Minister for the West Bengal state of India. Mamata Banerjee. Please forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, because I know nothing about this person, and all that I'm going to say about this person is derived from their hands. And the question around this person was around their position of power. This is a person of great power and influence and has been since 2011. Now, that's it. That's all I have on this person, other than what the hands are going to show me. So, can this person's hands show us in terms of power? How did this person rise to power? How does this person feel about power? And what does it mean to them? I mean, instantly, I would look to the amount of Jupiter and the Jupiter finger itself. This represents the ego and ambition within us, our need and desire to have power and control. It really represents a great deal about the psychology of the self and how we deal with power and what that means to us. So that's where I'll be paying a lot of attention today. Also, with a lot of other um, guidance from the rest of the hand. So first of all, I'll be looking at the hand shape and fingers and what this can tell us quite specifically about this person's personality and their character and their psychology. And instantly, I see what I believe is a dynamic hand here. We have actually quite a sort of triangular shape to the palm. Notice how the low-hanging lunar and the high set thumb kind of provides this triangular shape to the palm. I mean, it's angular, but Jupiter is certainly uh, high, as well as Saturn, with Apollo and Mercury not being as high set. And this immediately places, decision making, judgment, authority, ego, control, ambition, and society, moral judgment, ethics. Um, Bureaucracy, rules, law, and order and planning. These things are much more sort of heightened. They are on the top of her priority list in terms of her psychology, and that's what these the kind of the raised mounts tell us. When it comes to the fingers, the finger leanings can tell us a lot about how that psychology is developed. So when we see a straight finger, essentially that aspect of their psychology is in alignment and it is well developed. That's essentially what that shows us. Now, if I had seen a Jupiter finger that was as equally as long as Saturn, well, that would be someone who has a superiority complex. And quite often in these readings, and I still preach it, you can't diagnose from one sign or symptom alone. However, the fingers show us with much more certainty in terms of a person's psychology. They're a much more powerful indicator in the palms, although I still don't like to conclude from them alone. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that this person has a superiority complex because the Jupiter finger is, although high, it is not too high. It's fairly straight. There's a slight curvature towards Saturn. You can kind of see that a bit more naturally here, which shows in some ways that her ego is sheltered beneath her sense of right and wrong, which is not a bad thing, although there may be some effect to her ego by outside criticism, which again is not a bad thing. Being in a position of power, it's actually quite healthy to take on board and to be weighed down to some degree by outside and impartial points of view. If we were to see this on the extreme end of the spectrum, a short and dumpy, flattened, hopped Jupiter finger that was twisting and bending inwards sharply towards Saturn, this would show us someone who has been the subject of great critical role models. Their ego has been crushed. They are relying on others for guidance because their ego is so underdeveloped, so damaged. And that's not what I see here, obviously. I'm just sort of providing an example, as you know, within the sort of context of what the Jupiter finger can show us, because it's just so relevant here in this reading. And so, really, what I see here is someone with a very well developed sense of the self, power, and how we feel and think about power and control is not just indicated in the Jupiter finger, it is also shown in inner Mars, our sense of drive and aggression and motivation, and also the thumb in itself, because the thumb is an overall and superb indicator for a person's temperament, their personality, their temper. But the basal phalanx of Jupiter does feel somewhat widened. This person has a great need to control on quite a physical level, on quite a practical and environmental level. And being that this is quite a long Jupiter finger, being that it's quite sort of a raised and quite a large Jupiter mount, there is quite a need and desire for power and control and to dominate. There's quite a dominating spirit about this person. Dynamic hands are classically um, they have that very sort of dominant nature that makes it difficult for them in personal relationships. There is quite a sort of an ambitious quality about them, and the way in which they think and feel about power struggles within their life is quite a strong theme because they find it very difficult to find a partner in life because if they find someone who matches them in terms of their strength of character and personality, they feel threatened and feel that at odds with that. There's a conflict there. They feel they're kind of defensive, almost like they need to sort of prove themselves, and they feel somewhat inadequate. However, if they come across a partner who they feel is somewhat weaker than them in terms of their dominant spirit, then they feel a little bit disgusted with them because they're weaker. So there's that. It's a bit of a contradiction. It's a catch-22. They can never really feel happy. At least that's a very common theme I see in dynamic hands. And often they throw themselves into work. They are highly energetic and they have great energy about them. They are workaholics. They are prone to adrenal burnout and all sorts of adrenal kind of malfunctions because they don't really know when to stop and because they have this need to sort of compensate for other areas in their life that they're not quite tending to. And when they kind of feel the sort of weighing down on them, they just throw themselves back into work and sort of neglect those areas even more. That's a continual kind of common theme, at least anyway. It's not the same for all dynamic hands. And really, there's a need to be aware of and be supported by a partner who's very understanding. Actually, the dynamic hands partner has got a big task on their hands in that on that front. Now, in terms of overall sort of temperament, character, personality, just looking at the thumb here, and this is a pretty good example actually. I would say this person is, you know, that thumb is fairly well balanced, and I'm glad we're not seeing too much willpower. We're seeing a good amount of um, logic and ideas. And what this really shows us is this is someone who is probably quite capable, I would think, of seeing other people's arguments, of listening to other people's arguments, which is not always something that dynamic hands are very good at. However, there's a quite practical and analytical side to this person as well. They're not strictly a dynamic hand. There's a little bit of a mixture of that analytical um, approach as well. There's a good amount of practicality to this person, and I think that they're probably quite leavened in that way. This is really helpful. The thumb itself, it does sharpen to quite a point, and I feel like this person is probably a bit of a big spender. They probably have quite refined tastes. Luckily, it doesn't bend and flex too much. This is really important because if it did, it would show someone who probably hasn't got um, the sufficient consistent stamina and energy required in such a powerful, position of such power. But also, it means this person is look. this is interesting. It means this person isn't going to their will isn't so flexible. They're not going to be pushed to a point where they are manipulated by others. They are not working for any other kind of higher conglomerate corporation or anything like that. There's nothing, I would think, nefarious going on like that. At least that's one good sign of that. Now, the left hand here, it's slightly inwards, and I'm not going to take too much away from that, but that sometimes suggests that a person is not really, their will is kind of trapped in some way. It's the handbrake's on. There's no way for them to. There's a feeling there, at least left hand, that there is an inability to enact their will properly. Ah, and yes, notice the right hand here, nice and free, left hand not so much. So again, there is this kind of feeling here. We see it in two pictures now. I wanted to get a good, frame of reference. It's not always um, reliable to just look at one image and conclude. And I think really what that shows is there's the potential here for this person to be weighed down by certain, um, maybe it's red tape, maybe there are other people kind of above or other kind of organizations that are putting pressure on. Maybe there's outside influences in some way that's not enabling her to do as what she feels she wants to. So immediately I'm drawn to looking at the Mercury finger, and that is because notice the left hand here. You've got a larger space between than on the right, and this is showing us again. There's a feeling of the need to get away from those that are confining. There's a need for freedom, and even someone who isn't going to be subject to um, that kind of confinement. They won't be contained. Again, I'm looking at the other image. You can certainly see here. This is someone who won't be um, tamed, so to speak, or controlled, especially not in a relationship. Absolutely not. But in their position, in their role, I would think that they give a great amount of um, they give as good as they get. They give a good fight. There is a good amount of fight in them. In fact, inner Mars almost competes completely with Venus. There isn't a great deal of warmth to this person in terms of their kind of loving, how can I put this, sympathetic, empathetic nature is kind of lacking a little bit here. But that's not to say that this person doesn't care or doesn't have a good sense of right and wrong. There is certainly a clear conscience here, and the heart line is low set, it's deeply marked, it rises up in between Jupiter and Saturn. This is someone who has a strong moral compass. However, Venus is on the narrow side, and this is showing us this person is kind of lacking that warmth of spirit, character, personality. They're not the life and soul of the party, certainly not. But where they lack in that warmth, they are quite strongly, I think, motivated by emotional factors at the same time. It's an odd one because it sort of appears as though she has a secondary lifeline, and it could be interpreted as this is a second fate line. That would be more common. A secondary fate line, forgive me, a double lifeline is actually very rare. A lot of people misinterpret this. Um, and I might well have done that here because this, in fact, could be a Mars line. And this is, in fact, the lifeline. It's a very common mistake. And I'm wondering if I have, in fact, made that. And maybe I have. If I have, then I'm wrong about her warmth of spirit. Because there is a contradiction here with the heart line, the depth of it, how low lying it is, the curvature, and where it lands. So perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps I should go back on myself here. The Venus mount, however, is not very well developed, although it's not small now with my second reinterpretation. There is a feeling here that inside influences close to home are hitting this Mars line, though, if that's what this is, I'm not 100% convinced. It could well be a double lifeline. This is actually turning out to be a lot trickier than I thought. Not sure why my camera just died then. I think it decided I'd hold it off. Find myself slightly stumped now. The left hand shows the heart line is relatively straight and short. There is something of it reaching up and branching out. In the right, a healthy place, it's still fairly low set. And what I see here is a branch reaching towards the lifeline, probably I would say in her teens at some point. And this shows a very emotionally attractive event that led to probably some emotional reservation. It's hurt and trauma, disappointment of some kind. I can't quite see the same thing on the right hand, so this is certainly something that's far more impactful emotionally rather than physically. It's not so much of an injury as it is some sort of loss or emotional hurt. Her early 20s was there's a moment here where this is a rise of achievement, of success in some way that has enabled her tremendously, sort of kick-started and boosted and snowballed her career to where she is now. It wouldn't have been possible without this moment. And from this time onwards, you can see an island here. It's an incredibly stressful time. And overall, the heart line is quite straight on the right hand as well. There is something of curvature there, but before the overlap here, it is pretty straight, which shows us this is someone who's very able to make decisions impartially, although this is someone who is probably doing things for the betterment of others, who is quite emotionally motivated, shall we say. It's someone who enjoys finding solutions and fixing people's problems, but in a very objective and impartial way, and probably is able to make decisions very separate from her own emotions. So to conclude, so I've kind of gone off course a little bit here. I do believe this is in fact a Mars line. It's unusual to have a lifeline attached to the headline for such a long period of time, and that's why initially I didn't see this as a lifeline. But if you look closely, it does actually venture around the thumb, showing that potential for longevity and also, living and dying in their native homeland. The joining of the life and the headline for such a long period shows actually it is something of a sign of a lacking of confidence, which contradicts absolutely what we see here with the Jupiter finger. This person has a very good uh, and realistic idea and well-developed sense of their self. But what it also shows us is cautiousness. It shows us someone who is not going to take risks whatsoever. And also, when you look at the phalanges of the fingers, it's quite a strong, um, there's quite a lot of strength here towards decision-making numbers and practical as well. There's not a great deal of room for spiritual and emotional development. This isn't someone who is seeking, um, enlightenment or to find that perfect one. They are actually quite concerned with material and the practical, the mathematical, factual. There's certainly someone in a meeting who would say, "Well, I don't really care about your opinions right now or your feelings. What I want to know are facts. Give me the statistics. I'm not fussed about what you think. It's not relevant." And I think part of the reason why I got confused with this Mars line here is because actually, in some ways, it does act as the lifeline. The Mars line is our need to fight. And this is relevant here to mention because it does tie in with that need for that power and control, um, and our ability to rise to a position of power. As I said, inner Mars is strong. The Mars line itself is very strong in it. If it has sort of overtaken, it does run alongside perfectly parallel to the lifeline. If a Mars line is to kind of take over a person's life, if the fight essentially has become their life, that makes sense for a person in a position of power and the need to fight as well to get your voice heard, to pass certain legislation. to to prevent and uphold. The Venus mount in itself, it shows our desires, this person's will, their thoughts, and their desires. It's the sort of third, the basal phalanx of the thumb in a sense, and it's lacking. And that shows this person is sort of putting their own desires on hold. The way it's so high set as well, in some ways, shows a kind of self-concern, not selfish necessarily, but someone who is very sort of wrapped up in their own needs. But that again contradicts what we see. So I think this is someone who's very concerned with their work role, and their work role is not about themselves, if that makes sense. So they're burying themselves in their own role, but their own role is not about them. Another really interesting thing I want to point out here is this ring on the Jupiter finger on the left hand. I think this is a really telling sign. It's not very often actually that you see it, which is strange thing to say because, why not wear a finger on the left hand Jupiter? And really, what this shows us is some sort of insecurity about power, about control. It shows us a need to bolster and protect, to reinforce, to nourish our own ego. It shows potential blockage or obstacle in the path of our own development. And the left hand, there's a distinct difference here, I think, with the left-hand finger because it does seem to be a little bit longer than on the right hand. And as I mentioned before, I think Saturn is somewhat sort of curved in, so it's kind of distorting findings a little bit, perhaps. Notice how Jupiter is curved towards the thumb. That's very unusual. As I mentioned before, the curvature towards Saturn shows that sort of sheltering beneath um, the, the the ego sheltering beneath the sense of right and wrong, that moral compass. It shows us someone who is thinking about um, the rules and law and order and planning and what's right in society, contribution towards it. So the Jupiter finger leaning towards the thumb is the other thing altogether. It shows us someone who is doing things their own way. And I think internally, because we're looking at the left hand, they want to do things their own way. So there's a bit of a push and pull there. On the right hand, Jupiter, it wants to lean towards the thumb, but it's somewhat pulled back in again by that sense of right and wrong. There's an underlying um, almost tyrannical element to this person that is leavened, thankfully, by their overall temperament and their sense of right and wrong. And Saturn is, thankfully, also very well developed. There's no crookedness here, there's no twistedness. And Mercury as well, although there is some leaning in towards Apollo, that's very common in politicians because a gentle leaning of the Mercury finger shows us that kind of wilting um, diplomacy skills, as does the slight wasting of the thumb as well. There's that give and take that I mentioned before. This person is able to hear other people's perspectives. They're not going to just sort of nod and pretend they're hearing. I don't think they do genuinely hear them. However, there is the potential for corruption in all of us, and certainly where you see the little finger bending, there is that potential for corruption. However, it is again leavened, thankfully, by the overall length of the Mercury finger, and that can be said for anyone. And also, I think I didn't pay too much attention to it at first because there is, and this is very common in a dynamic hand as well, probably slightly higher Neanderthal DNA in this person, and that creates Dupuytren's contracture, which you see on the Apollo finger and the Mercury. It's very common for there to be a slight sort of pulling inwards. I've got it a little bit as well, and it's not a bad thing. I mean, physically it can be later on in life. I think you'd probably see it worse here if it was going to be an issue. But we don't see any of that leaning on the left hand. This person's I don't have any fears about this person being corrupted or internally at least, having any kind of deviancy away from what their power has or is enabling them to do. I think 42 to 45 was a particularly difficult time. Not sure what happened here, but it was a real struggle here. Perhaps it was something related to health because I don't see anything at all of the sort on the left hand. And so I'm wondering if this was some sort of environmental, physical, or practical issue. And you can see something of a square here formed out of this. So from 45 up to, I would say, about 55, so that's sort of a 10-year period here, where there's a need to protect health. Yeah, I would say there's certainly an issue here. Being that the Mars line is so tremendously long, it really inspires the image of someone who is fighting for a tremendously long time. And it shows potential, bodes well for this person in terms of their career. There is something of an obstacle striking at their happiness. I would say maybe 70, something like that, age 70. And being that this is the left hand, being that where it's kind of striking the nature of it, I would think that this is might be the loss of a parent. I don't know if this person's parents are still alive. Could be completely wrong about that. Yeah, you can see here before this tremendous struggle in life, early 20s inspires this success, which is much later on in life, probably something like 65 onwards. Without that initial kind of success this person had, this academic achievement in some way, maybe not academic, but certainly some sort of public success, it wouldn't have been possible for her to get to where she is. And notice how Jupiter and Mercury are somewhat conic, whereas the other fingers are sort of rounded. And I would say they're conic to pointed. Pointed always shows that someone who's, pointed Jupiter, excellent at breaking down, explaining information. One of the signs of the teacher. And as it is, a sharp tip of Mercury, again, sharp verbal expression. Um, silver tongue, a sharp tongue, someone who's very good with their words and is able to articulate very well articulately. A strong power of verbal expression in any case. And I think these are key traits for any politician to have. I think overall, this is a person who is power to them is enabling because it allows them to provide solutions for others. It allows them to satisfy their um, their pondering of their many ideas. They can actually put them into place, enact them, and in some way, this position of power that they're in um, enables them to sort of justify their kind of workaholic mentality. I think if they were in any other position, they'd have people sort of tapping them on the shoulder saying, "Do you want to calm down a bit?" Because of the position they're in, they are, a lot is expected of them. I noticed that Saturn here is very sort of wasted at the basal phalanx, which is interesting, and you can't really get a good idea as to what it looks like there. And really, what this shows us is someone who is, yeah, look at it there. It's very wasted Saturn there. It's showing us someone who's, that's a very sort of discriminatory characteristic there. They're not able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They work very, very hard. That's a key trait of the dynamic hand. They are, well, as I say, workaholics by their very nature. So that's interesting. And again, I think it's another sign that um, they're not doing it for themselves. It's another sign that they're not corrupt. They're not necessarily, perfect. They're not doing the right things necessarily, but they're not doing those mistakes. They're not doing those things that are wrong for the wrong reasons, if that makes any sense. Whenever they do something, shouldn't be questioned as though they are necessarily, trying to gain for themselves. Looking at their left hand here, And, I mentioned this obstacle that's striking at their happiness. Looking at the sunlight after this time looks to be something of a trident in nature, which is very positive. So this threat here, this obstacle, it's not going to succeed in its aim, whatever that might be, unintentional or otherwise. And I notice here we've got these fate lines that continue on afterwards. So I would think that maybe around the age of around about 70, late 60s, this person has a change in career. And I think there's doubling of efforts here. This person is still in some ways carrying on what they were doing before. They're still influencing, they're still advising, perhaps, but they are in a much more authoritative role, or at least they're continuing this authoritative role, and they're working in a much more sort of administrative role alongside it. And that's what I think I see in store for this person. However, I have no idea how old this person is. I know nothing about this person except what I have gleaned from palms. Let me know what you think about my analysis. I'm interested to know what others think, especially those who know this person. Um, Particularly if you live in the um, in this West Bengal state. You are quite literally an authority on the subject, not me. I want to know what your thoughts are, and perhaps you picked up on things here that I haven't. I'd be really interested to hear. Also, I am running fortnightly palmistry course. For those of you who are willing to learn, who would like to learn, you can sign up for my level 2 membership. It's 4.99 a month. I'm not sure how long I'll be running it. I might change things and start doing it through my website. I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. I'm still kind of finding my ground, but you can learn alongside a growing, emerging community of likewise interested palmists. And we're starting now at the beginning, so it's a good time to join. And I'm really focusing now on the chirogamy, and I'm putting a lot of effort into the next assignment. So I'd be really happy if you'd like to join me there. Please subscribe, please like, share, hit that bell and all that jazz, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.